Hello everyone. So this is gonna be somewhat of a short video. I don't want to talk for too long. But I just wanted to encourage the forerunners, the trailblazers of this generation, um, and kind of just give you some peace that you're not necessarily going crazy. Um, so right now we are in the beginning stages of a transitionary period. And the forerunner or the trailblazer, whichever term you like more, is the individual who's the first to cross over. They are the first ones to step foot into uncharted territory. They are the ones who step out of what is normal in order to become abnormal, which later becomes the new normal. They are the ones that shift the culture, that help humanity to evolve in whatever time period that is. And we're in a similar transitionary period where people are currently finding themselves uncomfortable where they are, yet where they're trying to be has not necessarily been created yet. If I were to give it a biblical parallel, we're currently in the wilderness. We're in the process of leaving Pharaoh's camp, if I want to use that story in that way. Um, So this is a time period where many different things are coming about, and it's important to realize that things are changing, right? We're in a different age altogether. We're no longer under Pisces, we're now in Aquarius, which means that with the change of the times, the way that spirituality looked in the last age isn't necessarily how spirituality is going to look in this age or the next age. Um, One of my favorite quotes, which I've often reflected on, is that the number one enemy of the new move of God is always the last move of God. And that has caused me to be a bit more open minded than some people believe I should be. Just to realize that just because things worked one way before does not mean that they were meant to work that way forever. So, even for those of you, and you know who you are, who are being called to release something new into the world, understand that unlike the people who may have went before you, who may have inspired you, if you're being called to present something new into creation, you'll have no mentor. You can only have a mentor in an area in which people have already been and gained experience, but in your case, you'll be the first person. You'll be one of the first people there. You'll be the trial experiment. You'll be the pioneer of a new civilization, of a new way of life. Meaning that there's a lot of, I don't want to call it confusion, but there's a lack of clarity that goes into it that may be disheartening, it may be frightening, but it's necessary. So, no, you're not necessarily out of alignment because you don't know where you're going just yet. Um, if you're called to be a trailblazer, that's because you're creating a place that does not exist yet. But the way to get on that path, the way to begin to create that path is to begin to leave where you are. Now, I'm only talking to people who've been feeling that tug in their spirit, who've been feeling that calling from God, that sending by God. Um, because we're in a 30-year process. That much I do know. Where, and in the period of that 30-year process, we're in the position where the forerunners themselves are in transition. So we're in the earliest part of this transition where the forerunners are still waking up. The trailblazers are still waking up. They're still leaving the former places that they used to be in. So understand that right now, the forerunners, the trailblazers of this generation don't really exist just yet. Um, Few and far in between. Even the people we may consider trailblazers and forerunners now may not even be it, just to be frank, because we don't necessarily know. The population, the majority, doesn't necessarily know where everyone's going. They may have been influential. They may have been a pioneer, a forerunner, a trailblazer in the system in which you used to be a part of. Someone who may used to be pivotal in a certain culture may have absolutely nothing to do with what's going on with the evolution of humanity, which I'm talking about. Um, so understand, you find yourself as a trailblazer, you are made to go into uncharted territory. You're the one who charts the uncharted to make it charted. You're the one that goes into the unknown to make it known. Um, in modern times, we call this the trendsetter. You're the one who does something outside of the box, which later people then embrace and put within their own box. So, no, there's no formulas yet. There's no guides yet. There's no books written yet, besides my own Fullness, Guide to Sonship and Mysticism. But I believe that, and I've said this in my scripture video, I believe that this generation has not really tapped into it yet, but it's something that's going to be a part of this generation. We'll have our own scriptures. That the scriptures meant to speak to the people in this time period, to speak to this generation, have, even if they have been written, they haven't yet been embraced because we're still stuck in the past. Those things that were written for one generation were written for that generation. If I were to refer to the Bible, things that Paul wrote to the Corinthians, he wrote to the Corinthians. There is no letter of Paul to America. Now, there may be a man of God, a woman of God, who may have such an address to give in this generation. And that's what we should be looking out for. It's the things that are meant to address our current situation. There are things that we may be able to glean from the past. Absolutely, not denying that. But even if, and I know this to be true, that some of what's going on right now is that we're going to begin to see the resurrection of some old things that have not been seen in a long time, to where it almost seems brand new. But we're also going to be seeing things that have never been done before, things that have never been seen before on the earth at the same time. Which has been one of the fun things I've done while exploring history, is seeing which is which. Can I find some of these things in the past so that I can differentiate when I see them in person? Is this something that's never been seen before? Is this something that hasn't been seen in a long time? And I believe we're going to begin to see both. We're already seeing both. Cultures. We've had so many formerly extinct animals resurrect themselves back into the genomes of zoology just over these past few months, that very literally things from the past are coming back. So even if you find yourself as a part of your destiny, someone who's supposed to take some of those things from the past and bring them into the present, it's still not the same as forcing the present to age backwards. Because even the inclusion of something from a previous generation and the manner in which you present it would be different from what it was. It'll still be something new. So it'll all come out of the flow of destiny. It'll come out the flow of your identity, the I amness of what you are. So I just want this to be a bit of an encouragement to those of you who find yourself as forerunners. You're meant to be alone. No one's supposed to understand you. At the very least, you're 27 years too early for when people should start to understand what you're doing or what you're building. Won't be for another 30 years when it's already built. Should you stay the course? Should you not allow peer pressure to keep you in the back? Because I understand there's still a difference between the actual trailblazers and just the first to walk the trail, which takes some courage in themselves. But this is about those of you who create the path. That people are not really made to understand you just yet. The systems that are being implemented for this generation are in complete contrast to the systems that many of us have come out of. I'm not just talking about Christianity. I believe the way that we viewed socioeconomics, the way that we viewed politics, the way that we viewed spirituality, religion, the way that we viewed education. I believe all of that is being transformed into something new. Um, Now, I personally know that I have a lot to play in that, but I don't believe I'm alone. I don't believe that I'm the only trailblazer on the planet. I believe that there is a remnant. Um, Now, how big that remnant is in comparison uh, to the rest of humanity, I don't know. I don't have a number for how many trailblazers there are. I believe that that's one of the easiest ways to get deceived. Um, is to try to count, to be honest. Because if you start, because often people who are insecure in their own calling, they'll begin to appoint other people to take their call. Um, a great example of this, and people like when I talk about movies, SpiderMan, Far From Home. If you haven't seen it, skip this part. But part of the plot of that movie is that after Iron Man has died, after Tony Stark has died, he gives Spider-Man, Peter Parker, his glasses, which have access to all of his technology. He pretty much gave him the full inheritance of everything he had left. And because he does not yet believe in himself, he gives it away to someone who was never meant to have it. And I believe that's often the case with people who do not yet understand their value because of not understanding what they're called to do or what they're sent to do. If you're called to be a trailblazer and you're like, man, people are not embracing me the way that they did the people I looked up to. Guess what? The people you looked up to most likely were called to something different. Very much so should you be a trailblazer. Because it's very often that even in that, the people who you used to look up to will most likely preach and teach against what you're doing. Because it's something they have no grid for. Don't even take it personal. That people you may have looked up to at one point may not support you, even when you used to support them. And I'm not saying that out of personal hurt. I'm saying it just out of a space of clarity as I've viewed my own circumstances, as I've viewed other people's circumstances. I have a show about listening to people's stories. Um, so there's some things that I've just been able to see over the past few years. There are some common threads. Something else I'd like to share, and then I'll end this because I don't want this to be too long. And if you pay attention, you'll be able to catch what I'm saying. So something that I've observed in nature is that oftentimes in the nurturing process, where there's birds, mama bird, daddy bird, and then there's the little chicks that come out of the eggs. They'll make the nest out of thorns and cover it with leaves and feathers to make it soft. So that while they're in an immature state, they're comfortable. But as they begin to mature, and once they're fully mature, or as they're maturing, the parent birds will begin to take out the feathers and the leaves out of the nest, thus making the nest so uncomfortable that the babies have no choice but to leave on their own. Some of you are in that same situation where what you are, whether you've realized it or not, is so important, is so pivotal, that your environment is pushing you out so that you can go and change the rest of the world. What you are is being rejected by where you are. Don't consider it personal. It's all about destiny. Later, y'all.